Hello everyone and welcome to the lecture on Amazon Detective. So this lecture will contain all these topics. What is Amazon Detective? Features, how Amazon Detective works, who uses Amazon Detective, typical workflow, Amazon Detective investigations, analyzing findings in Amazon Detective, finding group components. So what is Amazon Detective? Amazon Detective helps users analyze and quickly identify the root cause of security findings or suspicious activities by automatically collecting log data from AWS resources. Detective employs advanced techniques like machine learning, statistical analysis, and graph theory to process the collected log data and generate meaningful insights. The service creates visualizations that enable users to conduct security investigations more efficiently and rapidly. With Detective, users can access and analyze up to a year of historical event data, providing a comprehensive view of security-related activities over time. Detective establishes links between changes in the type and volume of activity and guard duty findings, helping users identify potential security issues. By providing pre-built data aggregations, summaries, and context, Detective allows users to quickly analyze and determine the nature and extent of possible security problems. Amazon Detective's automatic data aggregation and visual tools empower users to conduct faster and more efficient security investigations, enabling them to quickly assess the scope of security threats. So let's go through the features of Amazon Detective. So first one, Detective Finding Groups. Detective Finding Groups lets you examine multiple activities as they relate to a potential security event. You can analyze the root cause for high severity guard duty findings using finding groups. If a threat actor is attempting to compromise your AWS environment, they typically perform a sequence of actions that generate multiple security findings and unusual behaviors. Detective investigations to triage findings. With detective investigation, you can investigate IAM users and IAM roles using indicators of compromise, which can help you determine if a resource is involved in a security incident. An indicator of compromise is an artifact observed in or on a network, in a system or environment that can, with a high level of confidence, identify malicious activity or security incident. With detective investigations, you can maximize efficiency, focus on security threats, and strengthen incident response capabilities. Detective integration with Amazon Security Lake. So Detective integrates with Amazon Security Lake, which means that you can query and retrieve the raw log data stored by Security Lake. With this investigation, you can collect log and events from the following resources, which Security Lake natively supports. So Security Lake has two native support. One is AWS CloudTrail management events and Amazon Virtual Private Cloud VPC flow logs. Investigate VPC flow volume. So with Detective, you can interactively examine the activity details of the Virtual Private Cloud network flows of your VPC, of your EC2 instances and Kubernetes pods. Detective automatically collects VPC flow logs from your monitored AWS accounts, aggregates them by EC2 instance, and presents visual summaries and analytics about these network flows. So how Amazon Detective works? Detective automatically extracts time-based events such as login attempts, API calls, and network traffic from AWS CloudTrail and Amazon VPC flow logs. It also ingests findings detected by guard duty. From the extracted events, Detective employs machine learning and visualization techniques to analyze and present the data in a meaningful way. Detective creates a unified, interactive view of your resource behaviors and the interactions between them over time, known as the behavior graph. You can explore the behavior graph to examine disparate actions such as failed login attempts or suspicious API calls, rapidly investigating any activity that falls outside the normal behavior. Detective helps identify patterns that may indicate a security issue and understand all of the resources affected by a finding, such as AWS account and Amazon EC2 instances. Detective's tailored visualizations provide a baseline for and summarize the account information, helping answer questions such as, is this an unusual API call for this role, or is this spike in traffic from this instance expected? With Detective, you don't have to organize any data or develop, configure or tune your own queries and algorithms. There are no upfront costs and you pay only for the events analyzed, with no additional software to deploy or other feeds to subscribe to. Okay, who uses Amazon Detective? So when an account enables Detective, so this is an AWS account, it becomes the administrator account for a behavior graph, which is a linked set of extracted and analyzed data from one or more AWS accounts. So the first account which enables becomes the admin account. Then a behavior graph is a linked set of extracted and analyzed data from one or more AWS accounts. So administrator account invite member accounts to contribute their data to the administrator account's behavior graph. Detective is also integrated with AWS organizations. So your organization management account, the first account, the parent account. So organization management account designates a Detective administrator account for the organization. So it may be the same management account, or it can be some other AWS account which can become an administrator account. The Detective administrator account enables organization accounts as member accounts in the organization behavior graph. So this is third point is related to AWS organizations. So let's say you have 10 AWS accounts in AWS organization. First one is management account. Then you create another account that you can designate as administrator account, and other 8 accounts will be the member accounts. So here you don't have any like invitation procedure. The administrator account uses the analytics and visualizations generated from the behavior graph to investigate AWS resources and guard duty findings. Using the Detective integrations with guard duty and AWS Security Hub, so these two services, one more service is AWS Security Hub. You can pivot from guard duty findings in these services directly into the Detective console. So you can move or you can pivot from guard duty findings to this, because it will also have analysis from the other services done, like VPC flow logs and logs from other services, CloudTrail and all. Detective investigation focuses on the activity that is connected to the involved AWS resources. So let's see a typical workflow which involves all the components starting from the beginning. Okay. So in Amazon Detective, you conduct investigations using data from a Detective behavior graph, which is the data from all the AWS accounts. A behavior graph is a linked set of data generated from the Detective source data that is ingested from one or more AWS accounts. Detective source data include log data, which is Amazon Virtual Private Cloud VPC flow logs and AWS CloudTrail logs too, and findings from guard duty and findings from AWS Security Hub. So total 4 services. The behavior graph uses the source data to generate an overall picture of your systems, users, and the interactions among them over time. The behavior graph performs more detailed analysis of specific activity to help you answer questions that arise as you conduct investigations. The behavior graph correlates collections of findings, entities, and evidence that may be related to the same event or security issue. All extraction, modeling, and analytics of behavior graph data occurs within the context of each individual behavior graph. As new data comes in, Detective uses a combination of extraction and analytics to populate the behavior graph. Extraction is based on configured mapping rules. A mapping rule basically says, whenever you see this piece of data, use it in this specific way to update behavior graph data. For example, an incoming Detective source data record might include an IP address. If it does, Detective uses the information in that record to create a new IP address entity or update an existing IP address entity. So next one is analytics are more complex algorithms that analyze the data to provide insight into activity that is associated with entities. For example, one type of detective analytic analyzes how often activity occurs by running algorithms. For entities that make API calls, the algorithm looks for API calls that the entity does not normally use. The algorithm also looks for a large spike in the number of API calls. Analytic insight supports investigation by providing answers to key analyst questions and are frequently used to populate finding and entity profile panels. So next we'll see a bit more detail about Amazon Detective investigations. You can use the Amazon Detective Investigations feature to investigate IAM users and IAM roles using indicators of compromise (IOC), which can help you determine if a resource is involved in a security incident. An indicator of compromise is an artifact observed in or on a network, system or environment that can, with a high level of confidence, identify malicious activity or a security incident. With detective investigations, you can maximize efficiency, focus on security threats, and strengthen incident response capabilities. Detective investigations uses machine learning models and threat intelligence to automatically analyze resources in your AWS environment to identify potential security incidents. It lets you proactively, effectively, and efficiently use automation to improve security operations. Detective investigations is built on top of Detective's behavioral graph, which allows for proactive and efficient automation. Using detective investigations, you can investigate attack tactics, impossible travel, flagged IP addresses, and finding groups. It performs initial security investigation steps and generates a report highlighting the risks as identified by detective to help you understand security events and respond to potential incidents. So now let's see analyzing findings in Amazon Detective. So how to analyze those findings? A finding is an instance of potentially malicious activity or other risk that was detected. Amazon Detective Finding Groups lets you examine multiple activities as they relate to potential security events. So one is finding and one is finding group, which are a group of activities, multiple activities which are related in some way. You can analyze the root cause for a high severity guard duty findings using finding groups. So finding groups is in Amazon Detective. If a threat actor is attempting to compromise your AWS environment, they typically perform a sequence of actions that lead to multiple security findings and unusual behaviors. These actions are often spread across time and entities. When security findings are investigated in isolation, it can lead to a misinterpretation of their significance and difficulty in finding the root cause. So that is why we'll use finding groups, so that it can be, so a detective will know how they are related and in what way. So Amazon Detective addresses this problem by applying a graph analysis technique that infers relationships between findings and entities and groups them together. Amazon Detective groups related findings and entities together using its graph analysis technique, and it is recommended treating finding groups as the starting point for investigating the involved identities and findings. A detective analyzes data from findings and groups them with other findings also. So finding groups are also related to other finding groups that are likely to be related based on resources they share. For example, findings related to actions taken by the same IAM role sessions or originating from the same IP address are very likely to be part of the same underlying activity. It is valuable to investigate findings and evidence as a group, even if the associations made by detective are not related. So let's see some finding group components. So in addition to findings, each group includes entities involved in the findings. The entities can include AWS resources that are involved in the findings. The entities can include resources outside of AWS such as IP addresses or user agents. One example of an entity can be included in a finding group is an IP address which may be outside of AWS, and another example of an entity that can be included in a finding group is a user agent which may also be outside of AWS. And that's all. Thanks for watching.